Hello and a very warm welcome to the next episode of the Joy of Basing Essentials with me, Matt Sexfish. Today I have something quite special. It has been a long-awaited little tutorial about something that came out not too long ago, which are these Citadel contrast colors here that you can see right here. I have the whole set. A disclaimer right off the start. I have been chosen as one of the lucky guys to be invited into the Games Workshop headquarters. I think it was back in February, and therefore you could say that I'm not entirely free of bias, so to say. But don't get me wrong, I will really give these colors like an honest rundown, so to say, an honest test. I will be quite brutal with my verdict if they are not doing something nicely, and I will try to show you for whom these colors are, in my mind, best, how to use them in the most appropriate way, and maybe also show you some surprising techniques that I have discovered through the months that I now had the time to test these out. So yeah, this will be a general rundown on the contrasts, how they work, what they are, and let's get right to the topic. So the new contrast paints, they are these 32, I think, colors plus the contrast medium that I jokingly also call the Tears of the Emperor, trademark, and the thing is that there are also these special primers that come with them. The Rathbone and the Gracia, these two here. They also come in these little pots, as you can see here. Little base Rathbone and Gracia, so you can apply the foundation also with a brush. Although the results will not be as smooth, obviously, as with these sprays here. The thing that I have discovered actually is that the application of this foundation is very, very smooth. It's to my eyes, it's even a little bit finer than, for example, the old foundations, the Chaos Black and the Sky White, or I think nowadays it's called Corax White or something like that. But it's really, really great to finally have a foundation that not only has some tone to it, in this case yellow and rather cold tone, but also one that applies a very, very smooth and nice finish to whatever you spray to. So you can see it a little bit here on the spruce, that the surface is actually extremely smooth. And this is also something that's very important when you are trying to apply the contrast paints onto your models, because of the way the contrast paint kind of interacts with the surface that you apply it to. You can also see here, this is the gray one, this is the slightly warmer yellowish one, and they really make this amazingly smooth surface, which is something that was quite difficult to achieve before. I think I would recommend to use, for example, an airbrush to put in on like a cream foundation like that. But with these cans, this, for example, it has been just applied over a black standard foundation. And you can also use various of the techniques on a so-called 2K foundation, which is this one, black first, and then on top from zenithal or laterite source, I applied the Rathbone. And it already gives the whole model this little, this definition, this light source. The shadows are still dark, so we will definitely be testing these colors out on a model that is prepared like this. So they come in these bigger pots. They're in between the small pots from Games Workshop and the bigger, for example, Agrax Earthshade shade pots. They have 18 milliliters, and at the price point of, I think it's around €6, so the pot, they are actually prohibitively expensive. So getting the whole set is quite an investment. But yeah, let's see if it's worth the price. So if so, which colors I would recommend for what type of painter. All right. So yeah, so you can also see here I have ordered them around a little bit. There are quite a lot of brown tones actually here. In a way, there's like 6, 7, 9. 9 of these brownish tones going into red also, but mostly brown, which is quite surprising. But on the other hand, it's quite useful because you will be able to apply them to various materials and to prepare, so to say, the surface for various techniques like painting leather or fur with less hassle. So this is generally what these paints are made for. They're very transparent paints that achieve this gradually darker tone when you apply it also in several layers. So initially they have been invented to achieve a really nice depth or start for to paint your miniatures. When we were at the Games Workshop headquarters, they have said or they have distinguished between battle ready models and they called it parade ready. So battle ready is basically if you take the miniature, assemble it, put one of the undercoats on, the contrast undercoats, and then you just apply literally one layer of the contrast, and then this model is kind of battle ready. It looks like it has been painted with a base tone, then a highlight tone, and then a shade. So that's something that you can now achieve much easier with just 1.5 applications, so to say, just putting the primer on and then the paint, and then you're good to go. Also, it's a little bit like, let's say, a little bit like a safe game or so for painting your miniatures. What I mean with that is that you have a very nice starting point for also more advanced techniques that you can then apply on top of that. So, for example, if you look at this vampire here, it has literally been just painted using 1 or 2 layers of the contrast, and this is a really great base to then start working on the texture and so on as soon as you feel ready for it. So you can just leave it like that, play with it as a gamer, for example, and then if you want to give it some extra effort and make it look really nicer, then you can sit down and just continue, so to say, painting on top of that without a problem. So for this, these paints are really great. They're also drying with a mostly satin, sometimes even glossy finish, depending on how thickly they are applied. You might be able to see that here. These are the original sheets that we have been using also at the headquarters. And yeah, if the light falls right, especially here with this brown, you will be able to see that there is actually like a really nice, interesting shine that these colors have. And so this is exactly what I would like also to investigate and find out if there are some applications where you can put something like this effect to use. So your techniques, you can use this as a technique then for your advanced painting as well, not only for the beginner part, because it has also been covered quite extensively by many people, the standard use. All right, so this is how they look when they dry out. The best results are also achieved if this is applied onto a bright base tone, as these paints, they work as a kind of colored film and they're very transparent. So if you are applying that, for example, on a black foundation, these colors cannot really work out so well because you will not be able to see the tone from below shining through, and therefore this will not work. Think of, for example, a little strip of, for example, blue foil, and when you look through the world, you will see it also tinted blue. So this is a little bit how the Citadel the contrast colors work. They just give this filter on top of the surface and really allow for really nice effects like that. It also works on other foundations as well. as long as the foundation is applied very smoothly onto the model. So yeah, Citadel, Sky White, the 2K foundation, Badger, Styrofoam, Black and White, for example, Mr. Hobby, Krylon, all of these foundations, they will all work out. And yeah, you will be able to paint nicely as long as the surface is really smooth. Because what this color does is it kind of pools on these surfaces, and then in contrary to, for example, washes or glazes from other companies like Army Painter, for example, these tones they are more tacky, so to say, or like they infiltrate the surface in a different way. The way the medium distributes the color is different than with washes, for example. So it kind of grabs to the surface and starts to kind of tint it in its entirety, which is really, really nice. Yeah, so you can see it also a little bit here, maybe if the light allows. Nearly all of this has been painted using just contrast colors, and some additional tones like this white here was added then to put on some highlights, but you can achieve an effect like this really fast, like in an hour, something like that. So that is very, very practical and useful. It is very, very important that you understand that the application of these paints using the contrast medium, the Tears of the Emperor, it differs from, for example, using just plain water. I'm not sure if you can see that here, but on here I have painted both ways. So these kind of rough patches here is the contrast paint that is applied using water, and like the dilution makes the color behave differently. You can see a little bit pooling to the sides, while this more tinted paint here in the back, where the whole surface is covered and this filter is applied correctly, is when we use the contrast medium. So this is something that is actually very practical, because sometimes you can really use this this kind of nearly camouflage looking effect here when you dilute your contrast paints with water. And this will give you these great textures that you can then refine later on. And this is something that is very, very, very interesting and very cool, and has to be investigated in future paint shops. But yeah, in addition to that, you can, like, I encourage you to really experiment with these paints. So when you apply the colors, think about how you could vary that, for example. And one idea is, for example, using these Molotov applicators here. You can see it's like it has a reservoir here. It's like a brush that you can kind of fill. And then in the front, you just have bristles. So you can actually fill these with either contrast paint or with the medium. And then, for example, before applying, or like before painting the surface, you can just apply it very, very precisely on all of these surfaces. And then use another one, for example, with a contrast paint, apply that without having to switch around too often. And this is something that is super, super practical to just try out. You can also have these ink mini Mr. Ranger dispensers here, for example. They will spray the paint that you put in here in like dots. So something like that is also extremely interesting. So we will also investigate that. It's also recommended, if you are applying contrast to bigger surfaces, to use a very big, smooth bristle brush, like this one here. This will come in very handy, especially on a big tank like this one. And yeah, many people have already tried it out and tried to apply a contrast paint evenly on something like that without using the airbrush, but just the brush. And I think we will also give it a try and see if a bigger brush and the right application of the medium will make a difference, because I think it will. A spoiler. All right. So yeah, contrast paints, they really look best on models with strong natural textures, like organic details, like fur, leather, defined muscles, faces, so to say, hair, scales, wrinkles, and clothes, and all of these things. but they can also be applied onto armor and smooth ropes, large areas of skin, like for example for big monsters, with the help also of an airbrush. So we will also try that out. We'll have my airbrush here and show you how to put a tint that is very smooth onto the whole surface of a model. Alright, now I would also like to give you some useful tips for using your contrast paints and kind of having more time, like a better experience doing so. The first tip is to always keep your contrast medium, like the Tears of the Emperor, this one here, extremely clean. See it as something like water, really. So sadly, you will also need use quite a lot of that stuff here, and I also recommend you to maybe get this bigger pot and then have some of these smaller pots here already at your disposal. So you can right from the start just fill a little amount of that into these smaller containers, because as soon as there are any pigments from the contrast colors in here, there will be some effect on anything that you do. So it's really good to always have some amount of that dedicated for, in case if one batch, for example, gets a little bit stained. Because without this medium, you will not be able to achieve some of the smoother, nicer techniques. So I would do that and just fill these little pots with some of that contrast medium here, and I will be able to enjoy it for a longer time. Okay, second tip. You can also use, as I said before, like these refillable paint pens here from Molotov, for example, and you can also use them to apply contrast medium and kind of water down the surface area before you apply the paint, because you can think of the contrast paints a little bit like a quite aggressive wash, so to say. As soon as it touches the surface, it starts also to dry and kind of sink into the surface, which means that if you then try to, for example, to distribute it on the surface, on a dry surface, the thing is that there will always be already some effect, and it will be very hard to kind of distribute that and kind of make it smoothly. But if you water the surface down a little bit before you apply the contrast paint with pigments in it, you will have a surface that it will give you way more time to just work on the surface and smoothen things out. So this is something that is extremely useful to do that, because also in general you can add many layers of these colored films on top of one another, and what it will do is that the surface will just become darker. You can see it a little bit here on this model again, that this was just built up, just adding, in this case I think it was the skeleton horde, on top of this surface, and the more I did this, the darker it got. So this is something very, very useful to know. So you can really build up the tone by just adding more and more layers of it. There's also something like the critical mass to contrast paint. It behaves very differently if you apply it diluted, or if you apply it just straight from the pot, so to say. So this whole layered and shaded look, this battle ready look, this will only work if you apply it quite heavily onto the surface and allow the gravity and the medium to do its magic. If you apply it too thinly, it will just look a little bit like here in the on the top. It's just a little bit like a wash, just tinted a little bit, and that's it. But if you want to have this this look of layers already, for example here in the on the wing, you will have to apply quite a lot of it right away, and this is how it will work. So know about this and experiment a little bit around with the consistency. And yeah, you will also be able to use these dilution helpers that we have designed a while ago. Of course, also with contrast paints. Oh yeah, it's also good to give them a good shade because, sometimes you will see that down here, this is actually the white pigment that has separated from the medium and the pigments. Because the white pigments, they are always a little bit more heavy. They tend to sink down to the bottom of the pot. And it's very important to either give it a good shake, or if that's it's a little bit difficult, you can also use these coffee stirring sticks. And then you just stir it around from the bottom upwards. So it kind of unclogs, so to say, from the bottom there, like that. Could also work if you add some agitator balls, like some steel balls, in your pots, and then you just give it some really good shake. Jesus, this takes quite some time. As you can see, it's getting there, but it's still there in the back. And well mixed paints are really essentials for ideal distribution of these paints on the surface. So just take your time and make sure that all of that paint is nicely mixed. Oops. Okay, I think that would take a little bit longer. I wanted to show you actually here the way these paints dilute on our little helpers here. Okay, so right out of the pot, this paint is actually quite thick, so yeah, it actually will cover. So that would be something like a heavy base consistency. And if there were some nooks and crannies here, obviously the color would pool. But this already shows us that that actually these paints are quite thick to start with. Okay, now let's see what happens if we dilute it using the Tears of the Emperor. So this is breaking it down into like a medium layer consistency. And let's see if we can also achieve a glaze consistency. Yeah, these pigments are actually very, very dense. So that's also something that makes working with these paints really, really amazing, because they will saturate also the surface that they apply to, and therefore you can for example bring back some saturation into a model, give it just this little nice film of red, for example, and yeah, that will also work well as a glaze because of the high count of pigments that you see in there. Nice. Yeah, okay, so this is how they dilute. Okay, let's see the next tip. Smooth base coat. As I said earlier, it's very, very important that you have a smooth base coat, because only with a smooth base coat you will be able to achieve a smooth distribution of the contrast paint onto the surface, and therefore a smooth blending. Large flat surfaces in this are tricky due to the tendency of highly diluted, for example, paint to just pool on larger surfaces. Think of a wash, for example. But it can be done, as I said, when you treat the surface early, like before you apply the paint itself. So either you apply the paint with an airbrush, as a kind of transparent color filter, or you soak the surface with contrast medium before applying the paint. Think of wet blending, for example, with only one color. And yeah, and therefore you will be able to also achieve a very smooth result. Okay, that much as for a general introduction, I think, to these paints. I will show you how to apply that on the skin of this guy here in the next video. Also how to do these ropes here with contrast paint and start out with that. So that will be one topic. Another one will be a very simple non-metallic metal. For example, this Skaven warrior here, he has this rifle, and there are some really great tones in here that you can use to start out quite convincing non-metallic metal effect, either silver or gold. So we will show both here. And then also the big guy back here, you can see here, the Land Raider. We also show how to apply that. Just leave a comment which one you're interested most. I think I will do all of them and then just change the order of how they will be released. Okay, and maybe some words also to some of the contrast paints, like which ones in my point of view are essential and which ones are good to get from the beginning. So I think one of the paints that has really surprised me is the Apothecary White. Painting white is never easy. It never was, because white is a color that is very influenced by all kinds of pigments right away. But this year is really great to to just give this super amazing slight grayish tint to a surface. I think it was used somewhere here on the armor. I will try to find some images of that too. But with this, white is really super easy, and therefore it's actually really lifesaver, or like a time saver. So I will recommend to get this for sure. Then I'm a huge fan of some of the browns, because you will be able to achieve these really interesting leather tones very quickly. There is one that is quite dark actually. I think it's this Cygor brown here. I have used it to just very quickly block out these tracks here, for example, before I would apply some metals on here. And you can see that it looks super great, like some kind of very oily machinery with just one application. So yeah, the Cygor brown is really very useful. Also, I think for the leather, it is back. Snakebite leather, one of the classic names of paints, now returned as a contrast paint. So that one here is great for like a standard dark, nice brown leather, for example. I think it was used here. It's slightly yellowish tone, so this one here is really great. And I think I said it earlier, the skeleton horde is quite useful for different brown tones as a base, so to say. I'm not sure if I had to decide, for example, between these three browns here. I think I would take the Cygor brown for sure, because of the machinery part and the oily part. And then I think it would be this Snakebite leather, because it's just like the name itself just has this paint, so to say. You just need that. Then it's very useful to have red that will allow you to tint, for example, some areas that you want to look more alive, more vibrant, like skin. And for this you will need a red. So I think it's actually quite useful. If you have the brown, like the Cygor brown, for example, you can use the Blood Angels red here. If you don't, then you can also use the Flesh Tearers red, because you need a little bit like a darker red. So if I had to choose, I think I would do it like this. The Blood Angels red, then I can use it with the Cygor brown here. Okay, and then let's see which colors we will add in addition. let me see, where's the nice... There was this really nice... was it this one? There was this really nice color that prepares the surface before applying the non-metallic metal, the easy one. And it's a little bit like this, I think it's this one. It's a Terran turquoise, this one. But you will also need to have something to darken it down a little bit, because that by itself is just too green turquoise-ish. So the Basilicanum red, it's a really funny name, but that can be used to kind of darken it down. You could also try to darken it down using standard pigments, like just black, but I think the properties of the color will then change. It will not behave the same way as with just contrast colors. So yeah, I think I would do it like this. Yeah, so these ones, and of course yellow should also not miss out in this. Yeah, and I think it would be this Iyanden yellow, this one here, because it's very pure yellow. You can always tint it down a little bit with the red in here, with the bluish green here. Actually, what I would say is a really great start altogether, of course, with the Tears of the Emperor, with the technical contrast medium. You have to have that one. And if I had to choose a foundation, just one from the Citadel color, then I would use the Rathbone here, because with this you can really do most of the techniques. The gray one is quite specific. It also makes the paint on the miniatures look a little bit muted down. I'm a friend of yellow foundation, so yeah, there you go. This is what you would need to start out. Yeah, and in the next episode we will see how to apply that in a practical application onto, for example, the skin of this of this old survivor guy here from Kingdom Death. Alright, I hope you liked this one, and leave a comment down below which one you would like to see first, and yeah, I will do that in the next couple of weeks then. Alright, thank you very much for listening. Have a great day. Bye bye.